Spiritual teaching, or creation energy teaching, what it is, and what it brings into effect. Through the study of the spiritual teaching, it is recommended to become a responsibility-conscious, true human being, as well as to further the evolution of consciousness, the development of the character, the personality, and the general valueful behaviors. The quote spiritual teaching is the quote teaching of the prophets, which is delivered since time immemorial through the true prophets of the Nocodemian line as the quote teaching of the truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of the life. It is a teaching of common benefit for the entire humanity, for women, men, children, youth, and it deals with all small and slight problems as well as with all the large and main problems of the human existence. The teaching teaches the way of the progress and the effective development of the mental block, i.e. the consciousness, the world of thoughts, and the feelings and the psyche, as well as the behavior that is human-worthy and corresponds to creational, natural justice and the forming and leading of life. It teaches the right handling of oneself as well as with the fellow human beings, the entire environment, and with the fauna and flora. For the teaching and to its affiliation, there is only one prerequisite: the demand and the conscious will, as well as the conscious conduct, to stop with the incorrect and evil in every regard, and to become a true human being in effective humaneness. To this end, it is recommended to be open-minded, to gain a readiness, and to put it into action, or implement, and to let go of non-valuable and undignified behaviors, of the ungood and the evil. The quote teaching of the prophets and the quote spiritual teaching has no dogmas, that is, no tenets of faith, no belief in God or cult of God, and so on, and is characteristic of religions and cults, but instead it offers only absolutely neutral tenets, which can and may be followed in daily life, without there being a compulsion or any kind of Gewalt. Gewalt is the brutal execution of elemental might and force, but it is far above all might and all force. The tenets may be followed or not, at one's own discretion and will, but if they are followed, then the most important thing is that they actually function. And indeed it is the case that they are in no form and manner in any relation religion-based or sect-dependent, nor are they influenced by that even in a minimal form. There are no obligations associated with the learning of the quote spiritual teaching, because each human being that learns it is independent in regards to the learning, studying, and with respect to the implementation and utilization of what is learned. Therefore, promises also must not be made to anyone in regards to the learning and implementation of what is learned. The only obligation which must be entered for the learning of the teaching, spirit lessons, i.e. Lehrbriefe, the Geisteslehre, refers to the lessons mailed as a subscription, is a modest joining fee of 30 Swiss francs, as also for the spirit lessons coming out once every 4 months, which is parentheses 4 teaching letters, entirely approximately 50 to 55 A4 size pages. The small amount of 45 Swiss francs plus shipping is to be paid. From the memory banks, the teaching was accessed, formulated, and written down by Billy Eduard Albert Meier, called Beam, and the spiritual teaching, that is, the immemorial and true teaching of the prophets, is distributed through the organization FIGU, Free Community of Interests Universal, which is being spread worldwide and has no connection at all to judicial authorities, military, secret services, religions, sects, politics, or to terrorists, as well as groups hostile to state, society, or human beings. And those who learn the spiritual teaching also don't stand under the supervision of the FIGU, but instead they are in every respect free and self-determining. Those who learn the spiritual teaching can be human beings of all races, parentheses, up to the 14th age the permission of the parents is required, otherwise the age plays no role. Regardless of skin color, language, occupation, direction of worldview, profession of faith, sexual identity, or political orientation. But according to the rules of FIGU, no propaganda is conducted with regard to any political, worldly, religious, military, and sectarian belief orientation within the FIGU organization. And what is also important, the FIGU is not interested in how much or how little you own, but instead its interest only applies to how you approach the problems of your life formation, leading of life, your true becoming a human being, and the conscious development of your consciousness, and how you can advance everything to the best, for which the FIGU, with the actual spiritual teaching, and with other spiritual teaching-based writings and teaching books, can help you. Everyone who learns and studies the teaching is an important human being to the FIGU, and is always welcome, because everyone who puts in an effort to the teaching helps on the one side himself or herself to the true Menschseins, or being human in the real and true sense, just as everyone also helps to show the fellow human beings the same way. Only through this can it succeed that the valueful spiritual teaching and all its good is passed on and preserved, through which the entirety of the true Menschseins and all its values gain more and more ground and embrace ever more human beings. Only through this can it be guaranteed that the yearning of the human beings of the earth, after true love, freedom, after peace and harmony, is fulfilled. And only through that can it become guaranteed that all evil, compulsion-based acts of Gewalt, wrong, all disingenuous, might-greedy, the torture, wars, destruction, and senselessly ausgeartete of all kind, which is the very badly getting out of control of the good human nature, in the course of time eliminate themselves in the senses and aspirations of the human being and disappear from the world narrative. The truth is that many were not able to master their own life, or could only poorly cope with it, before they consciously and willingly put forth effort, and through learning came to grips with the spiritual teaching. They could not live like other human beings, which follows that they could not enjoy their existence. They lived by vegetating in the monotony, and without way and determination, because they believed that what was their life was all that it could offer them. They gave priority to the pleasure and the mammon, as well as to the religious and sectarian faith, and this before the well-being in regard to themselves, their family, their women, men, and offspring, their friends, acquaintances, and the fellow human beings in general. They have led their unsatisfactory life out of their false understanding of life at all costs. They have inflicted great damage to their partners, family, friends, relatives, acquaintances, and many other human beings, whereby they have nevertheless damaged themselves most of all. They lived in the incapability to effectively take over the personal responsibility for their own life, and for their family as well as for the fellow human beings in general. At last, they constantly created new problems through their own wrong behavior, as well as through their passivity in regard to their consciousness-based development, as likewise also through their entirely wrong mode of life and leading of life. Often, they were not able to deal with them, which follows that these multiplied, and so one problem triggered a cascade of further problems. They were simply incapable of positioning themselves to life and the reality, because they were not made attentive and were not taught regarding this through the upbringing, which followed that they already, from the earliest childhood, missed the necessary cognitions, recognitions, and their experience, and in the course of life never learned to come to grips with life, the reality, and its truth. Those, however, who have turned themselves to the spiritual teaching became conscious that their delusion and faith-based and entirely false mode of life pushed them always more into the seclusion of life and into the addiction of wrong behavior. This addiction of wrong behavior, of the wrong mode of life, and the wrong formation of life, is an evil and treacherous enemy of life, because the human being loses thereby the control and power over oneself and over one's behavior, whereby he or she can do nothing against it anymore. Some committed attempts of suicide, others landed in the gutters, in alcohol, in drugs, or they partly or entirely destroyed their family, while others landed in imprisonment. Many senselessly sought help in medicinal means, in religions and sects, or landed in dubious organizations or in the psychiatric hospital. But the truth is that none of these ways turned out to be sufficient and right, because the incorrect behavior and the false mode of life did not allow themselves to be changed, and broke through more and more, and became increasingly blatant through the course of time. And this lasted so long up until the point that they reached despair, and as the last step tried to find the rescue anchor in the learning and study of the true spiritual teaching. Through this they found help by way of self-help, and this is comprehensively taught in an accessible way for every human being through the spiritual teaching. After they had found the spiritual teaching, they grasped that they led a false life and did not live according to a true Menschsein, but instead they had, in some manner, a false imagination of life and all its values, as well as of the reality and its truth. They suffered from a lack of life wisdom, from false imaginations of life, and life unvalues, as well as in unknowledge and unwisdom, from which there is no cure, except that all life-related things are consciously and willingly learned and accepted, as well as implemented, how everything is given through the creational natural laws and recommendations, and how the entirety is brought forth and taught through the spiritual teaching. If you, human being of earth, are willing to learn through the spiritual teaching and pursue the true way of your life by turning yourself to the creational natural laws and recommendations, to learn them, comprehend, and also follow, then you enable yourself to undertake steps to master your life. The spiritual teaching is very extensive and includes in every regard all factors of the existence, and thereby also the forming of one's life, life conduct, and of the how you as a human being can become a true human being, and as such can live and accomplish goodness. For you, human being of earth, this all appears as a huge task, as it truly also is, and which you cannot master at once, and not in a short time, because all the false things you have collected in your life and in your attitude, opinion, as well as your thoughts and feelings, you have not learnt in one day or an otherwise short time. So, you also need again a long time to form everything anew, because the new learning that you are to strive for should actually be valuable and lasting. Therefore, you need a lot of patience, because a change on your side to a true human being and to the necessary recognitions, experiences, and the experiencing of this do not occur overnight. You must thereby also recognize and understand that in regards to the change, much more stands in your way than you can imagine. At the worst is thereby the indifferent and intolerant attitude toward the creational natural principles, which, as all comprehensive laws and recommendations are to be followed, whereby motivation, open-mindedness, and readiness, as well as the will to follow them, are of most importance, as also the honesty toward yourself. And only then, when these values are present within you, do you have the possibility to lead yourself, through yourself, onto the right way. Human being of Earth, you believe that your form with the life, the shaping of one's life and life conduct, as well as with your consciousness, character, and personality development, and with your common and particular behavior is entirely correct, realistic, and irreproachable. But this is certainly not so, because all the atrocity and wars, the terrorism, the envy, the criminality, the slandering and wrongdoing, the jealousy, the hate, the pathological craving for revenge, torture, lovelessness, and unconcernedness, the craving for retaliation, the vice or immorality, the greed, as well as all the coercion and the acts of violence prove otherwise. That is why it is necessary that you, human being of Earth, must change to the good and best, and thereby to the following of the creational natural laws and recommendations. Only thereby can you get away from all the ills of all kinds and become a true human being. But that also means that you must help your Nächsten, which is, parentheses, all those next to you, your fellow human beings, which is equivalent to a therapeutic value, because only when one helps one another in a good manner can a comprehensive success and a valueful interpersonal relationship come about and a true humanity arise. The learning, understanding, and following of the creational natural laws and recommendations, as well as the help amongst one another from human to human, is the true practical way to progress and success in regard to the true being a human being. And there can be no better way than when human beings understand one another, solve problems with one another, learn together, help one another, and thereby also form the society in a good manner. The fact is that the earlier you, human beings of Earth, set yourself in daily life to your own problems and to those of the community, in order to overcome them, the earlier you become responsibility conscious, productive, and are recognized by fellow human beings as true human beings. First of all, thereby, you find yourselves, your own abilities, possibilities, and values, and thereby you are able to master your own life, as you also become valuable members of the society, which are able to bring forth values in every conceivable relation. And if you have become true human beings in effective humanity, then the only way is to not fall back again into the old story of the human unworthiness. That you don't leave a chance to the old ways and allow what was already overcome to relapse, but instead that you are always considerate, that always the creational, naturally based, best, good, and right is done. It must always be considered that often already a single small negligence, no matter which kind, leads to a relapse and to a new dependency on the old behaviors. The only way to avoid a new active dependency and falling to the old ways again is to live consciously only with and according to what was newly worked out, and that the old ways and what was overcome is completely dissolved. Unfortunately, there are always many who work towards a change to a new and valueful life and also attain good successes, but they, however, bring up too little energy and strength to stay with these successes and to continue to steadily broaden them. They are then those who relapse, possibly in an addiction to alcohol, to drugs, and sink in a crazy religious and sectarian delusional faith because they go about too inattentively with what was learned and are not conscious that they must continuously work at that in order to hold on to the success, to enjoy, and also to expand it. The clear truth is that everything which is learned from the spiritual teaching must be preserved as a valuable good and must always be logically followed in life, whereby the individual human being must, in one's own full freedom, carry out the entire learning and following of the creational natural laws and recommendations given through the spiritual teaching. Everything in life can only then be good and permanent, as well as progressive and developmental, when the bond to the fulfillment between the creational natural laws and recommendations, as well as the human being, is held together. And to build up this bond between the human being of earth and the creational natural laws and recommendations, the spiritual teaching offers all necessary teaching facts and guidelines, which, however, at last must arise from your own recognition through learning. And what the spiritual teaching teaches is very comprehensive and contains the following 42, but also many other important points. Human being of earth. Number 1. You must admit to yourself and understand that to be able to really master your life in a creational natural frame, you are powerless over yourself without better knowledge and skills. 2. You must be knowing, free from every belief of any kind. 3. You must be clear that not one God exists who supposedly leads and guides and determines your fate, rather solely the creation universal consciousness. Here's an explanation of creation and what it is. The creation is a tremendous neutral, energetical, and evolutive Wesenheit being, parentheses, creational-life. That is not a Wesen as such, rather a Wesenheit, as a pure natural state of energy, a natural, evolutive, spirit, energetical activity energy. The Wesenheit creation is a pure, spirit, energetical being state, or creation life state, a radiating spirit light energy, and thus not a Wesen in the sense of a human or some other creature or any other personified Wesen, therefore also not a deity in superhuman form. A Wesen is an autonomously existing life form with its own individuality and personality in impulse, instinct, or consciousness form, with specific possibilities directed towards evolution of everything, and with its own physical, psychical, conscious, part conscious, unconscious, impulse, or instinct-based development forms, such as human being, animal, creature, and plants. A Wesenheit is not a Wesen as such, but an immaterial or material form of existence, without an autonomously determining possibility of evolution, whereby, however, this possibility can be pre-given to a certain extent, for example, with the creation universal consciousness, with certain energies, with stones, water, and gases, etc. As a natural spirit energy form, the creation universal consciousness is based purely on causal evolution and an existing spirit energy form, out of which also causal evolution-based creation natural laws and recommendations are given. These again are neutral, positive, equalized in their existence. Consequently, they contain equally 100% positive and 100% negative, whereby only then the possibility of evolution is given. This equal value of negative and positive means that the creation universal consciousness, and therewith also its natural laws and recommendations, are absolutely neutral positive equalized. Consequently, neither the negative nor the positive outweighs one another in any way. As a whole, all of the creation universal consciousness is absolutely equalized. As a result, neither good nor evil exists in it, but only neutral equalizedness. Consequently, everything becomes existent in this manner, which means that every life form becomes existent in the same manner, i.e. is born, so the good or evil is developed in them by Anerziehung, or rearing, as is the same with the human being, who was born in a neutral, equalized manner, and develops himself or herself only through the rearing to that which he or she then will be. The creation universal consciousness is therefore in every form neutral positive equalized, because in the way that it harbors 100% positive and 100% negative within itself, it results in an absolute equalization of the two energies, which leads to the effect of the equalizedness. Namely, if the two energies and their forces are equally strong in every respect, then neither one nor the other can predominate, but only lead to an equalization. The whole corresponds to an energetical knowledge and energetical wisdom, as these are also present within the creation itself. The spirit energy form, creation universal consciousness, accumulates its knowledge and its wisdom steadily further in a spiritual energetic manner, and indeed in the form, by taking on into itself the ongoing evolution-based processes and outcomes of the entire nature, of the entire universal content, and of the human beings, and all other life forms, as an energetical knowledge and energetical wisdom. Through this, the creation grows cumulatively as a spirit energy form, and indeed so long until it reaches its highest possible energy form. If this level is reached, then it lays down in slumber, that is, the universe falls into contraction, whereby after a period of 7 times 311 billion, 311 trillion, 40 billion years of evolution, based a new universe, i.e. a new creation universal consciousness forms as a primal creation, in which no coarse matter is present anymore, but only purely spiritual evolutionary energy. The creation universal consciousness is therefore a very high spirit energy form that can be designated as an individual spirit energy Wesenheit, which is not a Wesen as such, rather only a very highly developed causal and evolutive spirit energy form, which as such continuously accumulates, and indeed through the achievements of evolution of all that which has emerged through its causal and evolution related laws. The creation universal consciousness is the natural production of its own evolution, just as the human being and all other life forms, as well as the entire universe and everything existing in it, corresponds to the causal evolution forms pre-given through the creational natural laws. In its natural evolutive energy, it is formed so high above all material, and thus is existent so immeasurably high above the human beings in a pure spirit energetical level, that it would be impossible for it to position itself in any kind of communicative connection with a human being. The creation, as a pure, personality-free form of energy, arranged for causality as well as the evolution, is alone in its existence, and it is neither a duality nor a trinity, but rather an independent, natural and evolutive, single energetical form of unending spirit energetical greatness and might. you must explore yourself and make a moral inventory of yourself. This is number 4. You must explore yourself and make a moral inventory of yourself without fear, as well as without self-conceit and without wanting to be better than you really are. 5. You must allow yourself to not place a God nor its alleged responsibility and will over yourself, and to not believe in such an imaginary appearance form. Rather, you must be in charge of yourself and in every respect be responsible for yourself. 6. You must understand yourself and trust yourself, as well as your abilities and potentialities. Thus, you must take your life into your own hands, and not giving your undignified and delusion-bound trust to an imaginary deity. 7. You must accurately define and admit your own faults to yourself. How you also have to admit this towards your fellow human beings who are involved in that. 8. You must be unreservedly willing to eradicate, through your own efforts, your character flaws, wrong behaviors, and harm-bringing deficiencies. 9. If you have inflicted any damage onto other human beings, then be willing to talk with them peacefully and reasonably about it, and make good the damage that was done in a commensurate manner, and indeed, no matter what type it is, and whatever effort it also costs you. 10. If you have hurt other people through words, etc., then be prepared to make everything good again by means of connecting conversations and seeking forgiveness, as well as by building good interpersonal relationships where you always have to be careful to not to hurt others anew. 11. You must constantly continue your personal inventory and immediately acknowledge the errors to yourself when you make any, in order to then remedy them. 12. Through a purposeful meditation, you must seek, establish, and deepen the connection within yourself, where you must also recognize your own will in order to carry it out, because only you, all alone, are the power that determines over yourself, your consciousness, your thoughts and feelings, over your psyche, and your actions, as well as over the achievement of your abilities, potentialities, and wishes, etc. 13. You must willfully and consciously strive to awaken within yourself and experience the inner awakening, whereby you then align your daily life accordingly, and then must follow the principles of the real life and the creational natural laws and recommendations. 14. Your own well-being must come first, whereby you can only attain this if you live in unity with yourself, by which means, in the second place, you are then also capable of looking after the well-being of your Nächsten and fellow human beings. Your Nächsten is those next to you, or neighbors, the next ones. 15. For the meaning and purpose of the fulfillment of your life and all your life's efforts, there is only one single highest authority, you yourself. Consequently, also the carrying and exercising of responsibility in every conceivable relation falls in your own responsibility. 16. Every responsibility which you bear and exercise, you must be able to bring into agreement with your own conscience. Hence, you are your own confidant, and you rule over yourself, without any others being able to rule over you. 17. The only prerequisite in order for you to accomplish the whole thing is your desire to become a true human being in effective humaneness, in order to abandon the so far unfulfilled life and develop yourself in your entire mental block, so therefore in the consciousness, in your thoughts and world of feelings, as well as in the psyche, to a higher form, whereby also your character and your personality move in better and more valueful paths. 18. The main task of your efforts in every form and manner must be that you find yourself, that you recognize yourself, and you change yourself in the frame to the better and to a good human being, that you gain ample respect from yourself and with the fellow human beings. 19. In every regard, you must always support yourself, because truly only you alone can change yourself to a better and good as well as extensively viable human being. Namely, no other human being can do it for you. No human being can, in his or her kind, in his or her character, in his or her personality, as well as in his or her behavior, etc., be transformed and changed by someone else, because each person can only do this for themselves. 20. You may under no circumstances, through offered money, titles, belongings, possessions, and prestige, or, quote, divine salvation, etc., be diverted from your main task, namely to learn and work on yourself in order to become a true and viable human being. 21. You yourself must, in every respect, put forth effort towards your transformation to a true human being, because only through this are you able to sustain yourself and reject all unreal, what is false and invalid, as every religious belief which leads astray into confusion, dependency, to a lack of independence, and to a consciousness-based slavery. 22. You must reject everything unreal, belief-related, illogical, as well as what is contrary to intellect and reason, and turn yourself solely towards the reality and its truth, which are contained and to be found only in the creational, natural laws and recommendations. 23. You must always remain full of energy and strength, because it is not only the correct implementation of the transformation into the true human being that demands this. 24. You yourself must manage your own life, with all its highs and lows, in a more correct wise and in self-responsibility, because no one else can do that for you. 25. You, human of earth, you must steadily be your own Lord and Master and never make others responsible for any things which you yourself have to bear the responsibility for. 26. You should never let yourself be embroiled in public altercations. Rather, you should only represent your own opinion, and that only where it can be appropriately and harmlessly applied. 27. Your relationship to the fellow human beings and to the public sphere must be based on your affinity, on what the values of your knowledge, your wisdom, your love, and peaceableness, your harmony, radiance, and your inner and outer freedoms are. 28. Always preserve the anonymity and the secret when any things, words, or secrets are entrusted to you. The entrusted must stay with you alone as knowledge and must not be passed on. Trust is the most valuable foundation between human beings, because trust is the principle for that, so that correct, sincere, and valuable interpersonal relationships can exist. 29. If you want to fulfill the main task of making you yourself a true and viable human being, who also stands firm through all storms of life, then you must create your own structure for that, which develops, coordinates, implements, and preserves the values of your interests as a whole. 30. In each case, it must always be clear to you that for everything and anything that you do, solely you yourself must carry the final responsibility, because neither a God nor any other human being, apart from you yourself, can be your own authority, and therefore they cannot bring it to fruition. 31. It is always within your own authority to do the necessary things in order to form and guide your life and to become a true human being who cultivates his or her existence in true humaneness and also meets the fellow human beings, as well as the fauna and flora, with the necessary attentiveness, assistance, and venerability. 32. Your own correct and fair, creational, natural, just guidance and forming of your life, as well as the righteous formation of your Wesens, your honesty, decency, and respect, your character, your personality, and your behavior, as well as your opinion, your knowledge, the love and wisdom, your inner and outer peace, the harmony and your inner and outer freedom, must be in every wise a highly esteemed good. 33. Likewise, the effectively correct leadership of your own person and the fair creational natural manner of the forming of your consciousness, your thoughts and feelings, and the psyche must always be a high value to you. Therefore, you must develop a determinative leadership ability for yourself, through which you can direct yourself in the righteous manner. 34. For every task that you assign to yourself, you are the sole responsibility-bearing position who is able to define everything clearly for that and to come to a purposive decision, as well as to perceive the responsibility for it. 35. Your conscience is in every case always your only means with which you are able to steer your decisions for and over each and everything relating to your thoughts, feelings, and deeds, and to allow the conscience to prevail at that. It requires your intellect and your rationality. Through both of these factors, you allow the answer of your conscience to appear in value or unvalue, which follows that you act consciously and rightly with understanding, rationality, and conscience, or consciously and obstinately false and senselessly contravene against it. 36. In every case with regard to the activity of your consciousness, your thoughts and feelings, your psychic condition, and your deeds, it is the case that you extensively decide about everything yourself, and hence also extensively bear the full responsibility for all your decision processes, as well as for your actions. 37. Your integrity and efficacy depends, in every kind and wise, and in every case, always on the communication with yourself. 38. In each and in every relation, you are self-obligated for the entirety of your self-created structure with respect to your life formation, life conduct, and for the progress and development of your consciousness into a higher form. Consequently, also for all your standpoints, opinions, deeds, and processes of implementation and decision-making. 39. In order to compensate for your wrong life conduct and behaviors, etc., as well as through your self-incurred personal harm, it requires your own courage, namely, because you can only turn to yourself without having to have fear from your own reprisals. 40. You must use all your energies and powers of your mental block to master your main task of life, namely, to become a true human being, a true human with a sense of responsibility in effective humaneness, and then manage what is acquired and gained. 41. You must have might over yourself, your behavior, your opinions, and over your own life attitude, as well as over your consciousness, your thoughts and feelings, and over your psyche, your actions, your freedom, your peace, your true love and harmony, so that others do not rule over it, and therefore rule over you. 42. Altogether, you must stand in equalized concordance with the creational natural laws and recommendations, with your character and your personality, as well as with your intellect, your rationality, with your conscience, and with your perception of responsibility. Only then you can achieve conscious success and achieve the fulfillment of your endeavors. That was written by Billy on August 5th, 2010 at the Semyasi Silver Star Center. And now we move on to the nature of the study groups and national groups. The FIGU study and FIGU national groups are intended for all those human beings who seek the reality and its truth in all directions and are striving for the development of their own consciousness, their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions. This striving stands in the foreground of the interests of the study and national groups at all times to further the human being on the path of his or her personal, individual unfolding or evolution, no matter how this way may be disposed. Each human being is completely free, independent, and worthy of respect. For that reason, FIGU study and FIGU national groups can merely give them the space, i.e. the motivation, for their own cognition, their own self-cognition, their own knowledge, and their own wisdom. The effective and valuable information in all areas of life serves this purpose, with which the members of the study and national groups occupy themselves. They openly study it and seek to carry it out in daily life according to their best knowledge and capability. Motivation. The entire value of the FIGU information is unique worldwide because its wellspring is the spiritual teaching, which the Swiss man Billy Eduard Albert Meier teaches, who is in contact with a highly developed extraterrestrial civilization from the star cluster, the Pleiarin. The Pleiarin, or the Pleiaris, are located about 85 light years further beyond that what is known to us as the Pleiades, whose distance from Earth amounts to about 500 light years. The Pleiarin stars, whose inhabitants are also named Pleiarin, based on its system, are located in another dimension, shifted a split second, i.e., in another space-time configuration of our universe. The Pleiarin, as well as the high spirit level Arahat Athersata and Patali, and first of all, Billy Eduard Albert Meier, or Beam, who throughout his entire life as prophet of the new time has worked out completely unprecedented knowledge, great wisdom and love, which find absolutely no parallels on the entire earth, are involved in the mission of the spiritual teaching. The entire value of the teaching and a great deal of necessary information as of this writing are recorded on more than 20,000 written pages in the German language, which is now, as of this recording, probably over 50 or 60,000 pages, or 70 published books. However, the whole will only become fully appreciated in many hundreds of years from now, or in approximately 800 years from now. Only then, according to Pleiarin's statements, will the spirit teaching cognitions bring great fruits to the human beings of Earth. The entirety is, however, already now being presented, spread, and unfolded through the free community of interests universal, or FIGU, at Hinterschmidruti 1225 CH-8495, Schmidruti, Switzerland. However, though, in no form and manner is it proselytized. The FIGU study groups and FIGU national groups around the entire world already occupy themselves in the appreciation of the spiritual teaching, in its origin, teaching of the prophets, as well as the teaching of the truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of the life, with all its cognitions and values. And they do this by gathering together, studying, translating, and bringing forward everything that needs to be learned, whereby they offer in the respective language of the country, to each human being or those interested the opportunity to freely and individually integrate into this process. This is done so that each human who is willing and concerns himself or herself with this can gain great values and advanced cognitions for their life out of it as a result. Indeed, the entirety of the teaching also offers comprehensive cognitions with regard to the real history of our Earth, as well as the origin of the universe, the effective meaning of life, civilizations foreign to Earth, the real meditation, the interpersonal relationships, and the love. There are, however, also many other aspects included therein, such as the human society, the culture, the consciousness, the subconsciousness, the psyche, the character, and the spirit, etc., and so forth. The scope of the topics for study and for discussion is extraordinarily extensive and encompasses all areas of human life. And all of the members consider the FIGU study and land groups as a permanent, unceasing, lifelong effort of evolution in all directions. Only the free, individual, and conscious unfolding of the individual guarantees the fulfillment of the sense of life, and also the creation of all humane and interpersonal values, as well as the logic, and ultimately even the attainment of the worldwide peace. Equality in the approach. We members of the FIGU study and land groups are not and do not consider ourselves, quote, all-knowing ones, but rather in every respect only as searchers and students, because we must also learn to live, and thus we learn to handle or control our own thoughts and feelings, and to fulfill our work-related, private, as well as other duties. We also do not lift ourselves one iota over next to us, but rather we try to approach them with an optimal relationship which is founded in absolute equality, equal value, venerability, and in appropriate self-restraint. We never consider the value of a human in and of him or herself in connection with his or her societal position, his or her financial situation, his or her abilities, his or her knowledge, or the like. For the value of every human being is given and remains once and for all unchanging by the very nature of his or her Menschsein. We accept every human just as he or she is, and we know to appreciate his or her personal kind, which we, in principle, amicably encourage. This we do because we wish that each human is himself or herself, i.e., becomes himself or herself, and can unfold or evolve into his or her right form if he or she finds the way to this. He or she determines this way himself or herself, as well as his or her own thoughts and feelings, his or her opinions, purpose, agenda, intentions, and experiences. Absence of belief, critical faculty, openness or honesty. We members of the FIGU study and national groups are neither believers of the FIGU teaching nor of anything else, because we know that the way to real cognition, to knowledge, to wisdom, and to love goes solely by way of our own critical thinking. And this happens down to the last consequence, whereby everything is analyzed, compared, considered, and thought through, whereby the human comes to his or her own and unique conclusions in every respect. Critical thinking, however, in no case means to exhibit that exaggerated, unhealthy criticism, a know-it-all, fanatical prejudice or partiality, because such unvalues inhibit, together with a religious or any other belief, the recognition of reality and its truth, as well as the obtainment of all that which is valuable. The free, open, unbiased, and critical thinking is therefore necessary, so that the human in this individual, kind and wise, is able to recognize and figure out the truth in one or the other direction in order to gain the truth and to integrate it as effective values in his or her daily routine of life and activities. And precisely with this value of thought, the members of the FIGU study and national groups operate with regard to the material, information, the knowledge and the cognitions of FIGU, as well as the teaching of Billy Edward Albert Meier, as also the extraterrestrials and the spirit levels. The entirety thereby has absolutely nothing to do with any belief, a religion, ideology, with any sectarianism, or with any blind representation of this, or that a line of thought, rigidity, dependence, bondage, subservience, fanaticism, and unfreedom, etc. The FIGU study and national groups nip all of the enumerated negative characteristics, approaches, and tendencies in the bud, as FIGU itself does this worldwide, because their nature is extremely primitive, antagonistic to purpose and life, cultish and stagnating, and through these unvalues the human being incur consciousness-based enslavement. Thus they become weak creatures when they dwell themselves over them. Theory and practice in dynamic interaction. At this point, another very important aspect is to be mentioned. For the members of the FIGU study and national groups, there exists no single theory, but rather only the practice. Therefore, we understand theory and practice as two sides of a coin. Our entire study in the long run fundamentally represents the learning of the real life, that is, the actual practice of life, and thus the practice of life-based process, the life-based facts, the connections of the same kind, and the causal law of nature. As a truth, we recognize above all that which finds its resonance in the effective reality, what one is able to grasp, to experience, to undergo, and to put into practice in one's own life through the causal effects. Only in this way does the real knowledge and the resulting essence of wisdom arise, as well as the certainty that everything is indeed as it is written, thought, felt, or said, and just as it is taught through the spiritual teaching by Beam. The determination of the members of the FIGU study and national groups thus consists primarily in learning to live better, rightly, and in accordance with the creational, natural laws and recommendations. Thus, we want that not only ourselves, but also the fellow human beings in general, who are willing to turn to the teaching, to implement and form their everyday thoughts, feelings, and actions better in their own everyday life. And this is not simply about talking better and impressing with one's own supposed, quote, progressiveness, or, quote, spirituality, or, quote, scholarship, or, quote, intellectuality, or similar. We of the FIGU study and national groups, as well as all other members of all FIGU groups, are no wiseacres or know-it-alls who seek to shine and brag with their supposedly enormous knowledge. We attempt only in all modesty, but without any submissive humility of cult religious influence, to fulfill our obligations with regard to our own life, our own consciousness, our own thoughts, feelings, actions, and deeds. We are looking to widen our duties in a purposeful, conscious, and ongoing evolving or unfolding, creating and practicing all of the necessary human and interpersonal values. Nevertheless, we are certainly not ashamed for our worked out recognitions and experiences, and we don't shy away from formulating and presenting them openly to the public. The access to the truthly information of the teaching should be guaranteed to every human being so that he or she can either fathom this, further process and utilize, or, however, reject, be it for any reason, any possible prejudice or hindrance. Objection to cultic attitude. Clarity, the real value. We are not mystery mongers who would be delighted to get into any secret mischief and to conceal the truthly facts from their fellow human beings. As was already explained, without exception, every human being has the right to the relevant information in all areas of life, and consequently, we distance ourselves from all forms of mystery mongering, from all forms of elitist demeanor, and of the absurd view that the truth is only determined for these or those, quote, predestined or, quote, chosen or something similar. From this it follows that we are also against all forms of, quote, mysteries which cover up banal truths and mundane connections through the garment of assumed mysteriousness so as to make themselves interesting. Talking to you, David Wilcock. For this and other reasons, we strive to provide the best possible clarity, the best possible depiction or expressiveness, and precision of all our information, translations, texts, and lectures, so that every interested human being can confront oneself with the clearly laid out facts and to carefully study it in the form that suits him or her. Rejection of all surviving systems of belief and human stagnation. As already mentioned from the above, as well as from various other texts on our websites, our groups entirely dissociate from all religious, from all sectarian, cultic, church-related, idol-oriented, consciousness-enslaving, suppliant, and ritual, as well as from anything in any way related to, quote, God the Creator, with any gods, angels, karma, channeling, or faith in general. Likewise, we distance ourselves also from the uncanny amount of further lunatic and paradoxical, quote, spiritual directions, quote, spiritual teachings, quote, esoteric teachings, quote, ufological teachings, quote, New Age movements, quote, ascension, etc. All delusional, belief-based and sectarian-based groups and organizations, etc., which these days unfortunately spring up like poisonous mushrooms out of the ground and often carry into many areas of life confusion, fantasies, dreams, wishful thinkings, and illusions. This instead of finally offering to the human beings what it is about, the reality and its effective truth, the laws of nature, freedom of one's own thoughts and feelings, the development of and cognition in all directions, as well as effective knowledge. Our groups, of course, do not deny that practically in every irrational teaching, a small splinter of the truth and truthly connections are present, which shine and thereby lure unknowing and searching people into unreal networks. That, however, does not change the fact that the actual concepts and starting points of such false teachings find no justification in reality and correspond to well thought out lies and even to the previously indicated morbid fantasy or to a belief. Don't know what that word is. The information of the Free Community of Interests Universal, or FIGU, that are learned from the FIGU study in national groups, made use of, and taught, and spread without proselytizing, are unique in their value and in their origin, and cannot therefore be compared to any other direction or teaching existing on earth. friendship, and close cooperation with FIGU Switzerland. The FIGU study and national groups are characterized by the official cooperation with the Semjase Silver Star Center in Switzerland, that is to say, with the core and the passive group of FIGU and various other official FIGU groups worldwide. This official collaboration we consider crucial in relation to the creation of an appropriate relationship with the free community of interests, and to the FIGU materials, and thus to the, quote, spiritual teaching, and with regard to the understanding and proper dissemination of all relevant information. This naturally also means that we make no difference between Eduard Albert Meier, or Billy, and the organization FIGU, founded by him. These kinds of differences are in fact not present and therefore non-existent, because the organization FIGU was founded by Beam, B-E-A-M, and is to date led and taught by him in the form of a regular core group membership, just as it is necessary and how it all was intended from the beginning. Our activity is thus built on the long-term and interpersonal relationships to the FIGU community, to the FIGU groups, and the FIGU members, because only in this manner do we see the real effectiveness, the real approach, and the guarantee that all FIGU information is disseminated and presented logically, appropriately, and non-falsified. Furthering and mastering of the German language. The FIGU study and national groups promote, with all means available, the study and mastery of the German language, because without this knowledge of language comes about a dependency on the respective translators, on their understanding and their interpretation of the original texts. This, however, makes it impossible to individually approach the FIGU books and the FIGU writings, as well as the free choosing of those, as well as the real understanding and the effective study. Add to that the fact that some explanations and definitions of the German cannot be equivalently translated into other languages, which is why these languages, despite all the efforts of the translator, a slight weakening of the original statements, as well as errors and inaccuracies of all kinds occur. The German language comes from the ancient language Aryan, A-R-J-N, and it sets in its entire value, in its precision, and in its possibilities the most perfect language of this earth. I will read that in German now. Hinzu kommt noch die Tatsache, dass manche Erklärungen und Begriffe des Deutschen nicht gleichwertig in andere Sprachen übersetzt werden können, weshalb in diesen Sprachen trotz aller Bemühungen der Übersetzer eine gewisse Abschwächung der Originalaussagen sowie anfällige Fehler und Ungenauigkeiten entstehen. Die deutsche Sprache entstammt der uralten Sprache Arien, und sie stellt in ihrem ganzen Wert, in ihrer Präzision und in ihren Möglichkeiten die vollkommenste Sprache auf dieser Erde dar. Furthermore, it is so in other languages, so far only a minimum of translated text is present, because the means and possibilities of the various study and national groups are up to now also minimal. The better one masters the German language, the better, faster, and more effectively one will be able to penetrate into all secrets and into the knowledge of the free community of interests universal. The evolution code, which Beam has weaved into all original German language texts of the Spirit teaching, promotes and accelerates the evolution of the consciousness, by which all possibilities of the real understanding, the real use, and the real practice of all values and cognitions of the FIGU will unlock to the human being. Parentheses. This code is effective also then if the book text is not understood completely in the absence of proficiency of the language, because it addresses directly to certain areas of the subconsciousness. Daily repetition, imperfection, mistakes, evolution, lifelong striving. Finally, it is to be made clear again, and to underline 2 times that all human beings in the FIGU, as well as in the FIGU study groups and FIGU national groups, as well as in all other FIGU groupings worldwide, are only human beings like all others also are. Human beings who commit mistakes are imperfect and are in no way infallible. Yet, we are human beings who put effort for their development and for the acquisition of the progressive knowledge and the wisdom in desired directions, and also try to recognize our own mistakes and deficiencies, and to repair as well as to improve our inner and exterior relations if it is possible. We are not starry-eyed idealists with naive strivings to transform the world today upon tomorrow, about which then agitation and resentment and skepticism lead to a deterioration when we determine that the sought-after transformation is absolutely unfulfilled. The single thing that we thus attempt to improve are ourselves, because solely through that can one's own lifelong betterment and relative perfection begin. To envisage the betterment and the relative perfection of whichever external circumstances, organizations, institutions, etc. That may and can, however, never ever occur through coercion, missionizing, arm twisting, and persuasion, rather simply through one's own life, through one's own example, through one's own new conduct, and through one's own actions and behavior. The members of the FIGU study groups and national groups are committed solely through this specific manner. The willing people apply themselves and thereby improve the world. Therefore, we require all those responsible-minded human beings participating, as well as those whose development and the further steering of all inner and exterior societal structures and aspects, who are not indifferent, and those feeling vanity, and those not yet fortified with listlessness, submissiveness, and apathy. We require that they themselves partake with us on this lifelong process, and therefore commit themselves so that slowly but surely the situation regarding the entire world becomes brought back in the condition in which no more destructive overpopulation exists. A world in which no human must hunger anymore, and no longer become murdered through the guise of fairness and love, the legal death penalty. A world in which no more torture, no affliction, no more wars led, no more conquering, no subjugation, no violation and becoming enslaved. A world in which politicians or religious sectarian leaders or power hungry no longer lie to the people and exploit it in various forms. A world in which all humans are aligned and have the chance, as well as enough space, for a free and individual development of their consciousness, their thoughts and feelings, their conduct and behavior, as well as have the possibility for a healthy life in a likewise healthy and natural environment. That was written by Andrzej Stepanovsky from the Czech Republic, Free Community of Interests Universal. For more information, you can visit figu.org, that's FIGU.org, or the various other websites. I will post links below. Thanks for listening.